on petitions and table? None, but I encourage you to make sure that community groups and your constituents are aware of that opportunity and from the number 5 is confirmation of minutes. 29th of March. Would you like to move those?
Happy to move, Madam Chairman. I've just got a question on on page 7. Talk about a report coming back to the executive policy meeting on the carbon farming issue.
Rachel, you're not in.
Yes, through your chair, in response to that particular matter, we have been having discussions with partner agencies through the Beyond 2025 process. And there's some work that's been done by Great South that we'd like to feed into this process, so that will come back to the next meeting.
No, thanks for that. The Mural Forum, accepted the challenge that we would rely on staff come back to the FCC for the way forward.
Will that be sufficiently achievable, do you think?
I think so. And we can obviously be briefed at a later date on just where we are on that.
Second for that. That's what it says. Councillor Martin, any other changes or comments? Thanks, Mr. Black.
Yeah, just that I had leave of absence for that meeting that's not shown in minutes. Should be shown in apologies.
Yeah. Right, thank you. Anything else? First of all, those minutes, all those perfectly valid.
Bye.
Next. Thank you. And the adoption of the climate change subcommittee resolutions.
Happy to move in the absence of the and see you.
Yes, Morris is there. Thank you, Councillor Roy. Morris, would you like to speak?
Morris, see you.
You're muted, Morris.
Oh, hello.
Can't hear you, Morris.
Hello.
Are you wanting to speak, Morris?
Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. So a couple of things in the minutes of the climate change meeting. I was thinking about the people that came to present to us, Mr. Graves and Mr. Patterson, and we did discuss their presentations at some length. And I think it's important that when people take the effort to come to talk to us and they come in a reasonable and sensible manner, that we do have a duty to follow up what they, what they're presenting. So I hope that, I know that we did talk about this some length, but I certainly hope that we can follow up on their recommendations. So that was just a comment about that. Also on page 13, where we talked about having a workshop to identify responsibilities and to move beyond the concept stage for climate change action. And so that's a recommendation to this committee. And I just wonder whether or not, I wouldn't die in the ditch about having a workshop. I'm not sure what other people feel at this stage about that, because I know that staff are working hard to make progress on the climate change action, and potentially having a workshop could sort of derail it a bit. Probably wouldn't, but might add to the workload and not be completely productive. So that was the only other thing that I want to mention about the minutes, and I don't know if anybody else had any further thought about that particular action of needing a workshop for that particular thing. Perhaps the staff might like to comment on that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Morris. Good point. I've got Councillor McDonald and then me and then the teacher staff.
Thank you very much. sort of my understanding of that action was really around communications, starting a line of communication on, and then perhaps the regional wide group taking them up when they saw that or got in a position to do that. So
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Also, comes up on page 27 in the next item, or in item 2, actually. Councillor Rodway regarding regional communications pathway. So I guess that's going to cover off more than one thing potentially. So you might say doubling up on the workload. Just keeping that in mind. And to comment about the submitters also, we did discuss a little very briefly in terms of the equality the other day. The potential to investigate Mr. Graves's suggestions as well. So I think it's still a wee bit live. And some of us are conscious that we want to keep that going. So thanks for raising it again. I've got Chairman Horrell and then
Yes, just on this workshop, I would have thought probably that would sit better with the regional group. I mean, in essence, this is really our domestic one about us actually walking the walk. And I think to be most effective, it may well be an initiative that the regional group do it. We're actually going to talk about responsibilities, etc. Because it's not just going to be here, is it?
thanks, Councillor Rodway.
Thank you. Two things, remember what they were. First is that you mentioned that we're going to be keeping in mind the recommendations that Bill and Graves made with regard to burning branches, etc., close by to the town. But I'm just not quite, I can't see the pathway. We're going to keep it in mind, and then what? Because in the past, I noticed that we keep things in mind for a wee while, and then 5 years later, when somebody comes in and reminds us, I can see that you respond. Yeah,
I'll let you jump in there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know with that particular one and Mr. Graham's presentation that the science team are having a look at the materials that have been supplied.
Oh, right.
We'll come back to some.
good. Oh, that's good. Thank you. And the second thing was, with regard to Councillor Rodway's comment about workshops being imposed on our staff, which is absolutely true. I advocate for Rewire the potential for council only workshops on some issues, in particularly in light of the petition that's going to be put out to gather information or views at least on climate change. This is something we haven't done as a council without start. This is something, maybe this could be tacked on to some other workshops, some other process that we're having, but a time for councillors to sit around and share their view so that we can have a more unified view perhaps, or at least know where each of us stand and see how broad our understanding of this is. I think we're lacking it. And I take Chairman Horrell's point that some of these ideas sit with the broader committee, but certainly I think that as the kindling is the heart of the fire, we need to know better where we stand as a group of councillors who are driving this project largely. That's again my opinion.
Thanks. Interested in the rest of the councillors' thoughts about that, because we could progress that quite easily if there was a design. Councillor Morrison will come back to that.
I guess just to follow on from Nicole's comments about perhaps taking that issue on workshopping to the regional group. I think we will be looking to do workshops in coming months with that regional working group. We're not quite there yet. We need a couple of cycles of monthly meetings to put some other broader parameters in place for the group. But we do anticipate that we'll be workshopping that as one take. The idea of the climate change education pathway and perhaps a newsletter we could take to that working group for attention. And I did run a top-down burn experiment on the weekend. Brexit by Grey White to the top of the pile to set it online and encourage a number of farmers to sit and watch the results on a Sunday afternoon in Waikato. And it burned all the way to the ground, and I think we contributed to improve the air quality in Waikato Valley. Sunday.
I agree with that, I did see that. I think unfortunately, the horizon was black smoke billowing somewhere else.
I'm pleased that you are practically applying the things we're doing at council. That's one. Councillor McDonald?
Yeah, thanks. Chair, just responding to what you've just asked for, yeah, I support that with Robert too. The climate change stuff, it's quite fair, I think it's quite fair to say that there's not a lot of built up institutional knowledge because it's all pretty new to us. And to sort of develop a bit of a collective view on a number of issues around the climate change space would be quite valuable. So yeah, I support what Robert's suggesting.
Is there anybody who's, vehemently opposed to Councillor Roney's section on climate change being considered?
Not opposed to it, I'm quite happy to have that, but I wouldn't like us to be doing a whole lot of things without staff to report back, but I'm perfectly comfortable with the idea of the council.
Of course. So.
I can confirm when I went outside this morning that the climate has changed.
Yes. Well, perhaps Robert, would you like to work with me on making that happen?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Would that work? So that will be an action thing. Good. Okay, so we have Morris, did you second those minutes?
Sorry, say that again.
Did you second the climate change subcommittee minutes?
Yeah,
Thank you. So we get Councillor Roy Murphy and Councillor Roy Murphy. All those in favour, press bell.
Aye.
Carries. Thank you. Exciting development. I have no notification of extraordinary or legal business and no questions at this point. So we move to item 8, which is Chairman and Council's reports. Has anybody been to anything lately? Chairman Horrell and I were at the Rural Women's Conference, yesterday, was it yesterday? No, day before yesterday. And a really interesting group of amazingly active rural women. And interesting to hear that they're trying to grow their membership for state as with many groups are struggling. And looking forward to being active and supporting the rural women and empowering the rural women. It was a unique situation because for a change, Chairman Horrell was the only man in the room. So it was an interesting looking at that situation. Well, he's coach and he's fine. Chairman Horrell, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, and thank you to Linda, who was quite a question mark because I've been subpoenaed before whether I could actually get there. And I rang the organiser and said, well, I'll do my level best, but I've asked Linda to do the opening and I won't, even if I arrive, I'm not going to step in and after she's done work on this. So it was actually quite good because it was rural women and we had a woman presenting first, then we had a few questions, but no, I was very impressed with their meeting. They have a researcher there who's been doing research on the Douglas years, and it's a bit like the song telling your life with your song. Because I was there and I was hoping to give her a bit more information because government adamant that it was wonderful and there was actually nothing negative. And we don't learn from history, you're bound to repeat it. The desolation is always fine, but we know that there was a rather large dark cloud that hung over South and New Zealand for quite a number of years. And it actually took a long time for innovation to get going again. So there are lessons to be learned, so I wish her well, but it was good to have the team approach, and people are always, glad to hear from us. That's what was one opportunity. There'll be more going forward.
That researcher was Dr. Rachel Bell, if anybody's interested in following that up, was very interesting about the narrative around the Rogernomic years in the international narrative, as opposed to what actually may or may not have happened. So, Councillor Gibson, have you got
On Monday evening, Jeremy and I attended a Matera Community Groups meeting, where Paul and Randall presented on what was going on with the Matera River and how that was going. Presented very well. They understood it all. I hung on to see what the hell was happening in these sort of community group things. I don't think I'll hang on again. Also, yesterday I was lucky enough to be semi-invited on the premise that I shut up all day to a Waimea project design group. And man, that was exciting to see what was going on there, and it's funded by Dairy NZ. And I believe that we had representatives there of their staff, and it was really good. It was hard to shut up all day, but that's where it is.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson.
Perhaps just to add a little bit more, to supplement that was, so that there is a DNZ initiated project, $1.3 million to be expended over 2 years. They're racing the top of it, but it's funded through the Jobs and Nature Fund. Interestingly, it's got a real focus on building capability amongst the catchment group and one of the development catchment group. The things that I think are interesting for us, even though it's going to be largely completed here with fan change to Atahi, they're sponsoring, or they will sponsor a consultancy to work with up to 10 farmers to look at farm systems change. And the expectation is that that will be available for extension purposes, so others can see the results of that. So that's interesting, and I was just wondering if there's potential for us to contribute through our staff participation, sense of what might be the reasonable targets that farmers keep in mind for that consultancy work, even though we haven't established limits, target, etc. And we'll come ahead of the ban change today. It'll be interesting to see what the results are with the set of figures and see what comes out of the consultancy analysis on farm systems change and achieve those. And also up to 5 to 8 kind of wetland type or interfield interventions to respond to nutrient loss. So again, some good insights we expect from them.
Would it be helpful for us to have a presentation on those opportunities?
We've got to be reasonably quiet, I think, because what they said, they'll present the high level end of it today at the nitrogen field day that I'm going to.
Right, yeah.
And then after the lower or more technical stuff that Councillor Morrison has suggested, I thought was sort of
I think
in
due course through Thriving South and through and through our staff participation.
Good to keep aware of that.
And I guess if I can come back in again, Dane Moss was there, and he seems to be out making duck ponds, which are actually working as wetland areas. Also made contact with Mr. Dingle, they've run a pretty hefty sort of an operation up in the Wendon side. And he's prepared to share a little bit of that with me at some stage. So, if we can get in and work with people, it's all going to go in the right direction.
I've got Jim Horrell and Councillor Frail and Councillor McDonald.
Yes, just on that, I think we do have to work a lot harder on those partnership approaches. I thought for a while that something like the old farm monitoring farmers would be good for farmers, and what they're proposing here would be ideal. People can come along, see what they're doing. Farmers learn better of other farmers than they do of regulators. So that's really good. Well, we're not running it. It's good to have stuff on your radar, because often we don't know the events are on. If you don't know they're on, we can't be there. And it's, I think, while we might have a slightly different focus, the DNZ is that sweet spot in the middle that we we haven't got enough resources that we need to be able to leverage off all these groups. And so thriving is another obvious one, but even to be seen at these some of these events are is actually, if we can, is quite positive. They are sort of again.
Yes, that's your
Yes, thank you. Just asking, Councillor Morrison, you mentioned farm systems change being the umbrella. How does that line up with our own view of what farm system changes are needed? Because I'm thinking, are they thinking environmental essentially, or are they?
Yeah, so very much a balanced approach, but a key factor is considering what's best for that catchment. In terms of the YBO and understanding the catchment needs. And if you were to aim for some provisional targets in terms of nutrient loss mitigation, then what are the options for those farmers in terms of what we consider change? So I think it aligns with us. Acknowledging that we undertaken ahead of confirmed plan change to the limits settings, but I think it will lead farmers or point them in a particular direction that's aligned with our thinking.
Could I just asking about this idea of a catchment-based approach? What's the strength to buy the entire catchment, farmers in the entire catchment? It's hard to judge from here.
There was 2 members of the catchment group in attendance at the workshop. They indicated that there was strong interest from their catchment members and not just dairy farmers. That was the catchment group was numbers of types of farmers, and they were farmers who know this project is coming and are keen to be involved, and not just dairy farmers being the recipients of the support around system change and or edge of field mitigation. So I'd say it's a positive one. This is like pretty engaged, high levels of farmer engagement.
Thank you.
And they actually wanted to do it, then they can transfer it out to the farms or other cattle.
That's what you're
I'll quickly just on the meeting of our one thing is something I was going to come back. That's fine. But we're discussing. We're certainly in engagement about obviously there's a lot going on about flooding and everything up north. So there was certainly a discussion about within the community board. They were saying, "Oh, should we be organising the town?" So there's actually a real opportunity there to really hammer home what we do around flood banks. So that was really a well good engagement.
No, I didn't need to.
In regards to the farm systems change, that is something that we actually around this council, we don't know what that is. To my knowledge, it's the intensity doing farming difference, and we say comes about and said, "Oh, so they talking the way we're talking." I said, "To be honest, we haven't got a position on farm system changes." So it's something that we do. It has been used very long. Be very clear that diversifying, or what is that? The question mark, a bit scary about it. So it's something we could actually determine maybe what we think, and hopefully the thing change the party's going to bring that into line.
Do we go one? Because what they're really saying, they're going to use all their stuff with Flint Riskmans and the fertilizer and do all that and change different management systems. But that's all to be sorted out. But that's in their goal at the moment.
All right, Councillor, I just need to go there. Do you need something?
Yeah, I just want to pick up because it takes a while to get questions around the room, but just going back to what Nicholas said about being at the Royal Women's Conference, and talked about those times that you experienced through those Roger years and the velocity of those set of policies running through. And you're absolutely right. We may agree on the destination, but we have to be very careful on the implementation when we do that. So it's a good lesson for us, and I would recommend a book from Neil Wallace when the farm gates opened, it's just a collection of stories about what we call the collateral fallout for those who have policy. So really good reading for us coming up with some really important decisions for this region. So
And Councillor, interestingly, Dr. Rachel Bell has used that book a lot in her research. So absolutely. Yeah. That was absolutely what she's doing.
Councillor Godwin, can I just get you to push the extension cord away? It's
safety.
push it back into the middle because it's dangerously applies to following the laptop off the table. I don't want to be responsible for an IT issue. Thank you, for your reports. Can I encourage us and me, guilty, as charged, to write your reports and we're part of them submitted for the agendas. Slightly more formalised, it means that we stay focused. In defence, it was only Monday that Councillor Chairman and I were out on, so we can have time. Would somebody like to move those,
Have to move in
reports
here.
next to the whole, seconded, Councillor Fail, all those in favour now? Against? Thank you. This is item 9, which is 9.1, actually, so the science update. And we'll welcome staff, Nuan and Karen coming up too. And while Nuan comes up, I would just like to pass on our congratulations to him because he has recently been internationally published for his expertise. Congratulations. You might like to tell us a little bit about that before we launch into your item.
Yes, so actually that's related to the PhD study. My PhD research actually the research was related to coastal pollution, particularly nutrient and trace metal pollution, as well as then I investigated whether we would be able to use bacteria today. So just support species as indicators, bioindicators to assess estuarine health across New Zealand. So that's a part of my PhD research. So,
Well done. Yeah, it's not easy. So thank you. Right, take away for our SG monitoring.
yes, morning everyone. Yes, through this presentation, I will briefly explain the key findings of this summer estuary survey, as well as the highlights of the 2 technical reports recently published on Hume River estuary. As we know, estuaries are the terminal receiving environments of our catchment. Therefore, subjected to significant stress due to land use activities within the catchment. Since 2001, we've been monitoring Southland estuaries through our State of Environment Estuary Monitoring Program that help us to assess current state and trend of those estuaries. So we've been currently monitoring 7 estuaries across Southland, as you can see in this map. And this summer, we have monitored 5 estuaries out of 7, including Hume River estuary, Jacob River, then Tortoise estuary, Waikawa and Haldane. From these estuaries, sediment samples were collected in order to analyze sediment metals, nutrients, and oxygen levels, but data is still in the process being analyzed. However, our field observations indicate that there has been an increased eutrophication in Port Ross estuary. And those eutrophic symptoms include extensive macroalgal beds and areas with anoxic sediment, as you can see in these photos. We have also observed deteriorating sediment condition in some parts of the Jacob River estuary with low sediment oxygen that correspond to poor condition rating. As you can see in these two pictures, in 2021, this one, sediment had deep ARPD with well oxygenated sediment on top. So ARPD stands for apparent redox potential discontinuity. That's the boundary where you can see the significant color change from the brown to black. But in this summer, as you can see in this picture, this summer modeling shows very shallow ARPD layer, almost very close to the surface with no oxygen in sediment.
What happened between what's next in shallow here?
Yes, I mean the shallow ARPD means no oxygen in sediment, which means the particular sediment, the fauna, they can't live in that sediment. So more sensitive, the species can decline under this condition.
We quick question.
Yeah.
So just in regards to there's a colour difference in type of oxygen.
Yes.
Same material.
Brown means it's got oxygen.
Yeah.
Black
Yeah.
means
Yeah.
it's stripped
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
That
And then we have all, sorry, in 2022, we have conducted a broad scale habitat mapping in the New River estuary. This survey includes mapping substrate type and areas of seagrass, macroalgae, soil mesh, and marginal vegetation. So the results indicate, except for soil mesh extent, all other health indicators rated as poor for the New River estuary. And overall, the results highlight persistent growth of opportunistic macroalgae and large areas with extreme eutrophication, where even macroalgae are no longer able to survive. As here you can see the areas that with no macroalgae but extreme eutrophic condition. And then recently we have published another technical report on New River estuary, which assesses sediment quality of the estuary from 2001 to 2022 using our fine scale modeling data. So this long-term fine scale modeling has been conducted at 5 sites, as you can see. These red dots indicate our sampling sites, and we've been monitoring those sites on an annual basis. So the results indicate severe eutrophication in 2 sites out of 5, and those 2 sites are located in Daffodil Bay and Waihopa areas of the estuary. And key features of these sites include very muddy anoxic sediment and high levels of sediment nutrients and organic carbon. However, except for nickel, sediment trace metals data reflects very good to good condition for all sites that have been monitored in estuary. So,
Is that coming from a base of worse? Is it improving?
not actually. The thing is, New River estuary at the moment, trace metal not a problem, but the nutrient and sedimentation are the main environmental issues currently facing by New River estuary.
Could I just ask about lead shot in that season? Are you still finding evidence of lead shot in the estuaries?
We haven't done any. Haven't done any recent investigation. Yeah.
It's just quite interesting to look at what E and C quite close together. One is developing pretty good and the other isn't. And you start to think longer term with some strategic bridge and removal of actually help the health of that estuary. You But that issue is quite close to that Bay, and we've always thought that maybe that could be a community project where something could be done there, remove something there, and possibly that stretch up into the way like I am. I don't think massive project is the start of it. If it could help that flushing effect, you know, that may well more longer term be beneficial. It's times I've modified as you all know. Would some intervention actually help?
Yes, yes, because NEVA actually in 2019 did investigation to find potential remediation option for our estuaries, and yes, the one option is some sort of the hydraulic intervention, remove those sediments from the estuary.
So, we're going on from that, the changes that we're seeing now are permanent changes unless we take some remedial action. And you're going to get worse, is that right?
There's two parts to the response. One is around, I guess, stopping the inputs, be that sediment and nutrients that are creating the issue. The other is remediation, which is, you know, like mechanically changing things or planting things or doing action in history. I would say that unless you're looking at both, one or the other is probably not going to be terribly effective on its own.
So is there any practical remediation, doable stuff that we can do for somewhere like Daffodil Bay? What would that involve? What would that be?
So we've done some initial sort of feasibility work that one was mentioning. And I guess that is part of what is being looked at through Plan Change Tuatahi. I think at this stage to do some action would be a short-term fix, which doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, but it would be more in the short term until we can deal with the input side of the equation as well. Yeah. Plan Change work comes in.
That's what file, tomorrow, I mean, thoughts.
Just sort of somewhere or heading down. I'm just trying to work out so when we had those nutrients sorted out in new places. There's some of this stuff where you say it's never going to go right. We have something else.
Yes.
Or is there is this going to be 100-year long? It's going to be continuing. If we had everything fixed going in, that would actually fix it. Is there any examples of that world or
Yeah, to you, Chairman, Chair, so yes, actually the reducing or removing pressure won't fix the problem, because particularly moving estuary and Jacob estuary can find lots of sediment with pretty high nutrient levels. Therefore, we need active remediation to remove those high sediments or remove those sediments with high nutrient level. Otherwise, we can't see any improvement even if we reduce or remove those pressures. Yeah.
I've also got Councillor Rodway and Councillor Gordon. So, Chairman Harold.
Yes, the one thing I found quite interesting is the sedimentation rate, that apart from site F, the others were actually, I'm assuming that's right, negative, they've actually gone down rather than up. And is that a positive trend, or was it just that we haven't had a major study with it?
Again, not really, because the site, this site B, C, and D, and also the E, those, particularly the site E currently shows no active accumulation. The site E is located at Daffodil Bay area. So last 3 years data shows no active accumulation, but still there is a very thick layer of sediment in the Daffodil Bay area. But other 3 sites actually, we can't exactly see any sediment accumulation, because those sites are very located in high energy zone. Therefore, the river flushing and also river flushing help to remove all sediment from those sites. Therefore, those 3 sites actually we can't see any active sediment accumulation. Yeah, but site E is the worst area. Currently, sediment accumulation rate is around 20 to 25 millimeter per year, but it's far away from the national threshold. National threshold is 2 millimeter per year.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The sedimentation in the estuary and would there have to be processed to remove certain contaminants? I think that we are under the undertaking work here.
When you say contaminants from sediment, actually, currently, I'm not aware that of any method that we could remove those contaminants from sediment. It's really hard, and yeah, if the method available, probably it's very expensive. So the only thing is we could remove sediment with contaminant and then
So we return it to another part of the environment safely, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But again, the new the moment I mentioned, trace metals levels in low, and the nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, are the main problems. But alternatively, what we can do is we can remove those sediments and then use those sediments as fertilizer, or particularly, fertilizers for non-consumer plants. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Rodway.
Oh, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at the written report on page 16 and the opening paragraph there under estuary monitoring program talks about estuaries being important features, and I certainly agree with that. But it mentions birds, fish and insects. Insects are actually relatively rare in estuaries because they are freshwater species generally, rather than marine environments. But but much more common in estuaries are animals such as mollusks, annelids, polychaete worms that live in the sediment, for example, and crustaceans such as crabs and shrimps, which are very common in parts of the estuary. And in fact, the Invercargill estuary has a very diverse population of crabs, particularly down towards the sea, Whalers Bay, for example. And I'm wondering why, I know this program's been going on for a while, why we are not monitoring some of these organisms. And you mentioned birds, you mentioned the importance of the estuaries for fishing, for example, but there's no monitoring that I'm aware of that the Regional Council is doing of the fish populations, for example, in the estuary, their value for recreation and commercial species. And I wonder why we don't do this. I know that it's a much more comprehensive and expensive, but it might be a lot more useful for the general population. And if we could see, for example, that bird life, you're talking about migratory waders such as godwits, which come from Alaska, and an amazing journey, an amazing bird. And these are relatively common in our estuaries, but we don't seem to publish or have a lot of information about the effects of this, of the poor state of our estuaries on these other animals that people can identify with, and perhaps are more likely to respond to our concerns than just talking about anoxic sediments and macroalgae and stuff like that, which are important. But in terms of the appeal to the public to get behind us to try and protect estuaries, it might be more useful to have more information about these other organisms that people can, that people use for fishing, for example, or can identify with, such as the wildlife. So that's a long introduction to my question, which is really, why don't we monitor these other organisms which are equally important, probably more important to people?
Thanks, councillor.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, actually, regarding the invertebrates or the crustaceans and other gastropod species, actually, we are monitoring those invertebrates in our estuary. But thing is actually, and also with the public, some of those results in our under our fine scale monitoring data. So this fine scale, new river fine scale monitoring report, you can technical report, you can find some of those information. But currently, yes, as you mentioned, we are not monitoring the fish or birds, the population in our estuaries. Because mainly because of the financial constraint. But yes. That's the main reason. But yes, as the council mentioned, yeah, it is worth to monitor these other organisms in estuaries too.
Thank you. Perhaps I could ask that maybe some more information about these other organisms that people can identify with could be made available in future reports, even if it has to be gathered from other sources. I think that would be useful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor, that brings me to one of my points was, there are a number of organisations that have interests in this area, so we can come back to my question about where things are at with the likes of the IC7.
There's one site where we covered, which was.
Yeah, so I'll cover off the other councillors' questions, students, and then come back to that. Councillor Godwin, we're next.
Thank you, and wearing my hat, chairman of the Riverdale District Care Society. I just want to comment on how encouraging it is that there's such detailed and intense interest in estuaries now. It wasn't the case. And it's sad that we're in this position. Looking at how poor. No, but just in response to Councillor McDonald's query about fixing up the mud, basically for reuse. Just thinking about phytoremediation using plants to growing plants in the removed material, and how so many of them are capable of pulling out even heavy metals, datura stramonians, that springs to mind straight away. So there's a potential for cleaning it up awfully. But my question is, looking at the likelihood or the certainty of sea level rise, which could be quite significant, are you factoring that into your forward thinking about what might happen in an estuary like that with the sea level going up considerably?
Yes, good question actually. So we are looking into that, but currently the current project actually not exactly cover what would be the impact due to the sea level rises. Yes, but in future actually, yes, we are hoping to take into account those climate change impacts too.
Yeah, thank you. So it just may be worth noting that as part of the science team's preparation for the long-term planning process, we are developing a 10-year science plan that changing climate aspect is very much front and center in terms of where does our program need to go to be well positioned to answer some of those questions. So hopefully over the next couple of months we'll start to choose about what's in that work.
I was just looking at the graph here and what they've got the amount of it's looking very good. So I'm just looking at that E and F, and if you have a look at, you'd almost the lay of the land, you get say they were eddy points. And so that's where your hotspots, your collections are dragging that in. And so those contaminants that are in there, although the rest of it's clean, it's only clean because it's been tossed out into the oceans. So it's getting carried through. But where those eddies are and those hotspots, I would suggest actually what the inputs are coming into that estuary. And even if they're not being collected there, they're still going out into the bigger, wider environment anyway. So it's the inputs, isn't it, that we're really good on top of it. And those hotspots are the real indicators of what's the inputs are going into that estuary. So as we were talking about the clean sandy beaches, that's called flushing, isn't it?
Yes, no,
That's flushing straight out, you know.
Yeah.
We know the oysters, mercury and cadmium are the biggies in our rough oysters. And so that stuff's all going over Australia, I would suggest. So I guess we'll just need to keep this. So we've got a good picture here, but it's not
no,
necessarily
yeah, no, that's, yeah,
the true picture.
exactly, yeah, exactly right, because the east, the areas definitely where right of areas of the estuary is considered as depositional point of the estuary, where you can find lots of lots of sediment. Then these sediments can trap lots of chemicals, the metals and other organic chemicals. But in other areas, you can mainly see sand sediment. So the sand probably they are not efficiently capture those contaminants. That's why we can't see we can see the condition in those areas, but not in here.
Correct, we've got two more. We've got Councillor McBell, Councillor Evans, sorry, make it brief because I've also got.
Quickly, obviously, we head on trying to work out what we're probably going to see is not much change in these estuaries on the science. If we stop the nutrients and things, we're going to have to actually how quick the estuaries will change, and it's not going to move too fast. That's the side of things. But we have sort of government overseeing the estuary, and how do we? I'm just trying to say that no matter what we can do, all the nutrients we're focusing on estuaries. I'm just trying to understand about what will we actually see in the estuaries. You're indicating that we may not actually see any benefit, not benefit, but actually any change in the estuary for quite some time, even if we turn the tap off further up.
Yes.
I'm just saying, unless we do tell them,
It's time.
yeah, it takes time. So I'm just trying to say, we don't want to shoot ourselves, say, hey, there's no change, we're going to shut the whole system down.
No, yes.
Especially if we're looking at things in 25-year generation. Yeah, maybe even in a generation, we probably might not actually see huge benefits. I'm just asking that a realistic.
Yes, exactly. Yes, yes. Even if we shut down those the pressures, we can't see the improvement until we do some remediation. But even if we start remediation, we can't expect within 1 or 2 years a good improvement. We take 10 or 15 or 20 years. Yes, that's right.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's quite a good observation by Stuart that out of these key sites, the areas that are flush are proving to be testing better than the areas that are holding. We all know get rid of toxicity is through dilution. So that just goes to ask the question, do we need to test more areas where there would be? Because ultimately, if we didn't test these areas, we'd think it was fine. And maybe we're testing areas that we possibly know will give us a good return. Maybe we need to move those to areas where we can learn, as Stuart alluded to, there could be more being action and how becoming more of an issue.
Through Madam Chair, I think, just for clarity, the purpose of this program is to understand the state of the environment. So we can't be biased to monitoring in particular. We've got to have a good coverage of all the different systems within this. Hence why we monitor some of the sandier areas as well as some of those depositional zones. I think what you're talking about is getting into the more plan effectiveness monitoring and how effective are we being. And it's a slightly different type of monitoring program that we absolutely need to be looking at and beefing up. But they're just the purposes of those monitoring programs. is
But obviously, I understand that it's possible.
Yes, and it's core to understanding how efficient we're being as a council as well. So we try to have a bit of a balance in our program around that, but yeah, those are
I'm just highlighting my thoughts on the observations, and your good observations, Stuart. Guys, if we didn't have those areas, runoffs coming out, if the history was fully overflushed.
Yeah, so the state of the environment monitoring is also supplemented by some investigations. So we periodically do investigations into this as well. So we were reported the entire program today. We're just giving a bit of an update over what's happened this summer with the state of the environment program.
Thanks very much. That brings me to my question regarding some of our partners in the space and what we're ITC might be currently doing and how we're going to develop our those things.
Yep. So, perhaps the state budget going to put this outside for a moment, but since the last history update, almost 12 months ago, there has been a lot of work with staff from the Vicarage City Council and also with Marama really about what we need to do around the former landfill site. And so you'll see reference to scoping being undertaken around investigations to fill information gaps. So that's the conversation that's been playing out over this month.
I'll quickly like that move on. Councillor Roy.
Yeah, my question's about the rate of leakage from the old dump site in the estuary there. And is that accelerating? Is it stable or what's happening? What do we know about that? I went for a walk there the other day and from a visual perspective, it looks to be substantially increasing.
So thank you, Madam Chair. So we have done a bit of a scoping study around the Coast Landfill area, but it's not an area that we have monitored, regularly or have a target monitoring program about. So that is the work that is being discussed with the Coast City Council and partners that Rachel was talking about.
You're on the case.
It's being worked through our partner agencies around monitoring and further investigations.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for a awesome discussion. And you are being Karen. Somebody like to move that we note the report with Councillor Cloud, Councillor Gibson, all those that is out. Yes. Thank you. Item 2, speeding along we are. The climate change and community resilience portfolio update. Okay, is that you or Rachel or both?
Thank you, Chair. I think we're going to do a team on this one. But did you want to start with the work that we want to do climate change subcommittee and the project?
Second half of the report, that's with the joint interagency report from the governance level regional climate change interagency group. And yeah, there's a little bit of a mess, but we haven't quite got a good acronym for that. Working on that. Okay. So the idea of that report, which is attached to the SNP item, is that there'll be one report that goes through to all councils and the Te Ao Marama board, aligning the communication and the reporting, so key messages and things like that. So this report, I think most of the councillors here today will be familiar with most of the content. The key points to consider will probably be the section, I think it's on page 4 of that attachment, is around the key messages that came out of the second government level meeting. And so they were the messages around that the group felt like they're quite united, that they're acknowledging that there's a holistic approach required, and that there's a feeling of building momentum towards a long-term journey. And more in terms of how that how the meeting and the group is going. Yeah,
Do that now, tonight?
Yeah, no, we're maintaining building momentum. Still got some work in terms of understanding the needs of each of the port authorities relative to each other and ourselves. How quickly we can generate information that will be useful to the long-term planning process, which is looming as an immediate set of needs to support that LT3 process. And just exactly clarifying what information will be most useful to TAs and ourselves. Within the limited time available to generate information, what do we need to focus on that to take the process, knowing that once we've delivered that, we've got other work to continue on with as well. I guess one insight for me was, the TA seemed to put a lot of stake in the value of the LiDAR project data that will come from that. I think a realization for me has been that the LiDAR will generate a set of data. That's great. But it's in and of itself, it's data. And so what I think is really important is then what are the questions we are going to ask and seek to interrogate that data and do the modeling. And so that's one thing we'll probably be focusing on is, what is it that we need to learn from this data? What are the questions we need to ask to support the modeling? If our modeling capacity is constrained, then we will want to prioritize the questions we ask of the LiDAR modeling team or teams that are out there. That makes sense.
And on that note, there's the question that those questions can be agreed on at that interagency level. I think then that will provide scope naturally for that moving across boundaries and things too. So, and the last thing to point out regarding the interagency report, that an appendice attached to that was the finalised terms of reference for the group. For the group decided that it would remain a live terms of reference. So again, as the group there may be additional amendments purposes of getting on with things, but this is the final version of the terms of reference in the meantime. That's there for council's information as well. The next thing I'd like to discuss is the climate change subcommittee meeting that was recently held. You've already been a little bit of discussion about that this morning, but bearing that in mind, one of the things, one of the key conversations around that came out of the presentations from the two community members was the recognition that we need to drive some sort of regional communication pathway. And so, yeah, there's definitely some thinking going into that already. The workshop, we're looking at scheduling in a sense of capturing councillors' thoughts on that, thinking that in addition to just regional communications, it might also be timely to think through what councillors' thoughts are on the youth mechanism. So that's not specifically mentioned in the report, but just to keep that in mind too, that it's a LPP budget. And really, ideally, if we can get a clear idea about what councillors are wanting from that communication, then that would be also quite handy and kind of would tie in quite nicely to the regional communication conversation that needs to take place. And the last thing is the climate change perception survey. So where that's at the moment is it's being rolled out internally, that our staff at Environment Southland are being the guinea pigs, and it's being rolled out in the sense of a pilot survey so that we can tweak it and refine it, and already we're getting a little bit of feedback in terms of how we might need to refine it slightly, so that we've got hopefully the best version of that survey rolling out to our community sometime soon. And one of the things that came up at the subcommittee meeting as well was the fact that there seemed to be a desire for councillors to also specifically do that survey as a pilot, so that's also being worked into the project timeframes at the moment, so posted on that, so that's going to land. That were the main aspects of my section of the report. Hand over to Rachel to talk about the front end.
So the front part of the report just contains some information about key national releases, and the one thing I wanted to highlight at the subcommittee meeting was the Climate Change Commission report, and that there is an intention with the Climate Change Commission to see if we get down and to speak to not just ourselves but other interested agencies in the region.
Councillor Garshan and Councillor Thomas.
Thank you very much. You have a couple of questions. One is about youth engagement, and I see a real barrier there. I remember when the discussion was had in the council about changing the voting age to 16, and it wasn't universally supported. So I'm just wondering how councillors, older councillors like ourselves, can make a valuable judgment about how to engage with youth, and then, or is it the staff going to manage it? I hope staff are.
Yeah, I think we're at the point in terms of researching the best approach at the moment, where determining what the best approach and the how will be quite, the first step to that will be really clear from what you want to achieve out of that engagement. And so that's probably one of the key questions that it will be good to have some time to fish out.
Might be something we can discuss in our council owners.
Yeah.
Also from council.
Yeah, and then that will then lead into, okay, so therefore the how will be
If I could just follow up, my question is about TAs and their view on this issue, particularly around managed retreat. Is that the issue that's front of mind for them? Because it's an overwhelming issue in my view. And just thinking about the examples of what's happening in Maclari at the moment, where I understand they're in court, landowners, homeowners who are unhappy that they've been granted consent and they're building a floodplain. And so I'm just going to happen everywhere. Is that something that's come up in the discussions?
The first thing I would observe is that I wouldn't group the TAs and suggest that they are homogenous in their thinking and their approach and their maturity of responding to climate change. I think there are different stages of the journey. Some have forged ahead in certain directions, others are looking to build momentum. So it's different between the three, and understandably they're all got a different focus given the constituents and the lie of the land that are responsible. Managed retreat isn't a topic that has emerged as one that collectively we're going to give attention to yet. It's not suggest it won't, but as we understand and refine what it is we need to attend to within the regional working group, we're not quite yet at that stage where we've been able to narrow down and start to give greater levels of attention to specific issues within the mitigation and or adaptation space. I suspect that it will yet emerge, but we are not at a point where we're having those specific conversations yet.
Thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to have a bit of a the Climate Change Commission, and it says in here one of the statements that the government defines the recommendations. Well, they already have. They're not even out of the gate with climate change, and they did decline some really crucial recommendations from the Climate Change Commission in December of last year. And it's put us, and that's about raising the minimum price community. So it's put us in a situation, and we're talking about, I don't like the word carbon forestry, we're talking about constraining forestry. The New Zealand unit price now is at a point where it is forcing land use change, but it's not forcing the emitters to change their behaviour. So there's a large gap between the two, and that sits at where our problem is. And that's not going to be changed until the government takes seriously those recommendations. So reducing the limit on the number of units available for the option is a key recommendation that we need to move forward, and that will be constraining forestry.
Also, really, just started an article this morning that some lawyers were taking. More private funds. I haven't quite got to grips with it yet, but we'll come back.
Really good Radio New Zealand piece with Rod Clark that I think I may have shared around this briefly to clearly explain the challenges that we.
Jim Hall and then Councillor Ron.
It's just commenting on the comment about military retreat. I've probably said it before, but LiDAR is going to give councils the tools they need to actually stop continuing to build in the wrong places. And as we know from the prior conversation, people will resist change and they'll oppose it. But this is going to be a key bit of science to say, well, actually, you shouldn't be building here, and if you do, you're going to be on your own.
Councillor Ron.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a question, but I wanted to support what Peter McDonald has just said about the recommendations from the Climate Change Commissioner and the lack of, the government initiative really to get going in this area. And what Peter says is quite right. If there's any opportunity for this council to lobby government to take more, to follow those recommendations from the Climate Change Commissioner, then we could do that maybe informally, if not formally. But my question was in relation to the next steps, which are on page 26, which are all good. They're certainly at an early stage. Conceptualize is a word that I see there. This is good stuff. I know that we've got to do it carefully and it's going to take a little while. There's some good things happening there, and I wonder whether this is something we can get other groups like our catchment groups to start thinking about as well. I'm aware that some catchment groups are doing this, trying to get to carbon zero or net zero by a certain date. And I just wonder whether we could promote this amongst our catchment groups so that they start to quantify their greenhouse gas emissions on a on-farm basis and a group basis as well, maybe. I don't know if this is happening, but if it could happen, then I think that would be really good, because we've got to get this method not only for us to be doing, but for the region to do it as well, to find out how much we're emitting, how much we can sequester, and what we have to do to get to net zero. So I don't know if that's a question. Can we get the catchment groups to do that as well as we are?
Yes, you make a good point, I think, Councillor. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Absolutely, I think I just agree in the sense that our catchment groups are definitely some kind of key stakeholder that we need to get the communications approach.
Councillor Morrison.
Just on that point, I felt a really strong sense that catchment groups function effectively because they have sovereignty or autonomy or decision-making authority over where they invest their attention. And we wouldn't want to necessarily try and subvert that. I sense that the issue of, for instance, rural members accounting for greenhouse gas emissions may yet be addressed by the government intervention of the Haiti Wakanoa stuff coming. And so we may just want to make sure we maintain a watch on what emerges there, see if people need support with that. But I kind of sense that may be kind of taken care of. Let's see what happens with that. Pricing and the agricultural space on emissions.
Councillor McDonald, you want to comment?
Just briefly, as the catchment group, I'll just make you aware, and always talk about my hometown of Dipton is in the middle of a significant project to do with greenhouse gases and modelling on the four focus farms and doing that. So that project should conclude by the middle of this year anyway, and then we're moving on next to potentially monetising some aspects of that. So it's all pretty exciting work.
The final comment I would make actually is that we glossed over the private economic and fiscal portion of the report. Actually, I'm funny feeling in the back of my head that that is actually far more important than we've given credit for. So, but I need to read the report properly myself. So maybe we need to just with ourselves, because I think that the economic and fiscal impact of all of these discussions is, whether we like it or not, a very important part of it. With that, thank you very much for your comments, and I'm going to take everything right before tremendous work supported by the climate change summit money in the regional. It's an actual uncharted territory, so I think it's looking very professional, and it's looking like it's going to make some progress. Would you like to move that this morning? Thanks, Mr. Godwin. Thank you, Councillor Morrison. All those in favour, please say aye. Next. Carried. Thank you. Item 3. Strategy, Science and Engagement Group, and Policy and Government Reform Work Plan, including external agency report. It's quite exciting.
Is here. Thank you. I would kind of suggest that perhaps we take this item as read, unless there were any burning questions. So I'm conscious there are a number of other items still in the agenda.
Any questions, folks?
I'll move.
Are you? Councillor Roy, all those in favour, please say aye. Next. Right. Thanks.
Madam Chair, could I say that if people haven't read the guidance on the National Objectives Framework, which is referred to on page 40, the guidance on the National Objectives Framework is a very good read, actually. It's very useful and very helpful, I think, for our, what we have to do.
Yes, my reading list gets longer and longer. Every time I read something, I have to read something else. Working on it. I might need to have it kind of just soak in via osmosis or something. Thank you, good point. We have no item 10, so we have no extraordinary business. Which takes us to item 11, the public excluded business section. And we need to move into public excluded because
so we have 3 reasons to move into public excluded. So first one is to enable any local authority holding information to carry out without prejudice or disadvantage commercial activities. Also, the matters under discussion are before the Environment Board, and therefore council is authorised to deliberate in private, and also to prevent the disclosure or use of official information for improper gain or advantage.
thank you. So we'd like to move that. Councillor Evans, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Next.